This is why I spent 1 year outlining before I even wrote the first sentence of my story, and how I went from a couple vague ideas to 3 fleshed out main characters with enough lore, motivation, and backstory to jumpstart my sci-fi epic. Before I get into this, I want to talk about what question has gotten me so far in world building, but not necessarily just useless world building, but practical and story-driven world building. And that simple question is why? You're going to see why a lot in here. I've got a lot of big whys, little whys, but we got a lot of whys. So we're going to talk about basically the development from just a couple questions to fully fleshed out main characters. Not fully fleshed out. You still got to have room for growth when you're actually writing it. But some good stuff, okay? So what I started with, and when I finally committed to writing the story, because I had been juggling this idea for about 2.5 years before I actually committed to fully writing this. But I had a rough idea that there was a civilization living under the earth, Martian bounty hunters in the future, aliens on Mars, and tension between them and the humans, and an original power system that allows for really creative fights, and that could also have a large variety of other uses outside of fights and battles. I also wanted the power system to justify and explain a lot of supernatural things that happen in the Bible, as well as other religious texts and mythologies. So, with those questions, I started to develop, well, not questions, but with those ideas, I started to develop questions that I had to answer. For example, how long have they been under the earth? How far in the future does the Martian bounty hunter era start? And what makes the power system balanced, and how does it work, and how do people get their powers, how is it chosen, and many more. But I'll answer those questions regarding the power system and all of that stuff in another video. So subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. So, like I said, this video will focus primarily on story, lore, build-up in a vague enough way that you'll still be interested in reading the actual book when it comes out, so I will leave things out. After all, I am summarizing a 300-page document into this many minutes. I don't know how long the video is going to end up being. So, long story short, I started with a very vague idea of what I wanted to do, and through a series of questions that typically span from the word why. Can't have a story without a main character. So I made Felicur. Name is a respelling of the name Lucifer, which refers to the bringer of light. The first character that I created for the series, and the protagonist of the series. Well, one of the protagonists. There's a couple. When a world's this big, it's hard not to have a couple. So, time for the best world building question. Why? Why is he the main character? It's a question that I initially answered with something that is a bit different from what I ended up going with. At the beginning, I said that it was because they were bounty hunters, trying to tear down a tyrannical government by taking out officials that had power in order to weaken them little by little. Kind of like Ouija. Kind of like a Luigi. But moving on. Why? Why is he doing that? What's going on? What's the government like? Expand on that. Then I wanted to include robots, AI, Android type of robots, like Detroit Become Human robots, like Android 18, Android 17 from Dragon Ball robots. Why? The big question, why? Because we're like 2 weeks away from them roaming the streets, let's be real. Okay, so what role do robots have? Wow, what do they add to the story? Cautionary tale is one of them, but first we need to know when they were made. We need to go back a little bit. So I add into the timeline, they came out around 2035. We'll just say that. I think it's going to be before then, but that doesn't matter too much. I'm not covering this as just like timeline stuff. Back on Earth. So what next? How do we get from robots to living on Mars? War, lots of death, global warming catches up to us, and we move to Mars. Pause. You see why outlining in world building is so crucial right now. Because as of right now, I have a name for a character and robots in the past. I don't really have much more than that. And if I were to start writing, I would have so many like plot holes and whatever. So we gotta flesh it up a lot more. All right, let's move on. So humans land on Mars. They start rebuilding. What is Mars like? Is it how it is currently? Is it slightly terraformed? Are there species on Mars? I want there to be native Martian species. Why? Because it serves the story and acts as a nod to Native Americans experiencing colonization, not to mention a number of other groups in history. So, what is their effect on the story? Before that, what do they go by? What do these aliens go by? They go by Selthians. Remember that. Commit that to memory. Selthians. They look like reptilian kangaroos, okay? They wear clothes, though. They're not naked reptilian kangaroos. They're just reptilian kangaroos, and they got horns, like 2 horns. So, why? Why did I call them Selthians? Because they kind of sound like Sephiroth, and I think it's original. I just like the sound of it. Yeah. So, how long have they been there? Where are they from? Have they always been on Mars? If not, when did they get there? And don't forget what answer best serves the story for each one. It's important. So, well, to act as a parallel to the humans coming to Mars, and a recent fact that I learned regarding Venus being habitable 75 million years ago, I decided to make these people from Venus. Why? Well, I just said so that's kind of covered. But why did they leave Venus? Because it became uninhabitable. Okay, we already know that, right? Why did it become uninhabitable? So, because they were polluting, right? And it doesn't feel like that good of an answer right now. And I don't have that good of a reason yet, so we'll come back to this. I currently know the answer, but I'm trying to take you through the journey, so just ride with me. So, just assume that they're all answered. I did this for every single... If I did this for every single question that came up in this video, it would be hours, and I feel like this is already going to be quite a long video. So moving on, I want there to be tensions between the Selthians and the humans. Now, this is a big why. Why do I want tension? Because stories thrive on tension and conflict. It's essential. If you don't have conflict, then you don't have a story. What's the point? So, before that, who are the humans? Right? Because we have the humans and the Selthians, but there's lots of different humans. There's so many different types of humans. So who are the humans that end up going onto the Mars? Who end up making it and surviving? It's rich people. Okay? So is there tension internally between the humans? Yes, because tension and conflict rock. It rocks, dude. If you can have tension and conflict, do it. Yes. Why? Side note, I was watching WALL-E at the time and was inspired by the super monopoly that was B&L, by and large. And that got me thinking. Before there was just one company that ruled them all. There was 2, right? There had to have been 2 before there was 1, because they just slowly form into one big one, but there was 2 at one point. And so I'm thinking that's a great catalyst for more conflict. So that's why I just said. I didn't even have to look at the script for that. And also a good opportunity to have the birth of royal families on Mars. And I think royal families are always so fun to play with in stories. Because I'm the writer and I'm like puppeting all these people. Moving on. So the families that were at the top of the 2 companies ended up becoming the leaders of the collective that came to Mars. Cool. How long were they on Mars before they had conflict with the Selthians? Another big question. I want it to be like a curse that wakes you up from death, like a consequence to actions that happened generations prior. Why? Because accountability can't be assigned to anyone specific. And that's good, because it complicates things. So, why? Because that shit happens in real life. And I want to expand on that. Like, you could say it's an analogy for systemic racism in America, but it's also a lot of other things. But at the end of the day, this is a fictional story, and I'm talking about humans and aliens. This is not a direct comparison to anything specific. It's just simply inspired by real world stuff, because I'm a real world person. Moving on. So the Selthian and human conflict happens 300 years after they arrive on Mars. Why? Now, this was a tough one to answer originally. It took me a few weeks, I believe. After all, I'm doing this all in hindsight. I've already done all this stuff. This took me about a year to do, so I'm like This is very heavily paraphrased, and I'm leaving out a lot of details, but I'm trying to give you just the crucial stuff. So why does the conflict arise 300 years later? Because, actually, before that, let's take a look back at the robots. I don't know why, but let's just do it, because that's how the brain works sometimes. I'm not ready to answer this, so let's talk about the robots. I want the robots to have a role in the story too. So where are they right now? Where are they when the tension, the conflict happens between the aliens and the humans? Well, they are hiding. A group of them are hiding, living out their life peacefully on Mars. Yes. Why? Guilt. That's why they're hiding. That's why they're not doing anything. Why do they have guilt though? Why? Because they were responsible for killing a bunch of innocent people in an attempt to hurt the humans. They hurt native Martians. Who? The Selthians. Why did they try to hurt the humans though? I didn't add this in there. Why do you think, man? Why do you think? Why do you think they tried to hurt the humans? Just gonna leave that out there. I'll let you answer that. How many Selthians were hurt? All of them. Okay, but that wouldn't make sense. How would you have tension with humans if they're all dead, right? Well, 300 years later is when they arrived. So let's continue this. So the Selthians were on Mars, but there was also a group of them that were somewhere in space doing God knows what. That group from space came back 300 years later after the humans arrived and saw the corpses of their people in the caves of their establishment. They believed it was the humans. I mean, who else could it be? The humans are the only other species on the surface of the planet. All the while, it was actually the robots who were hiding away. This was after they did it, and now they're hiding, they're guilty, and they're just sitting somewhere, right? So when they approach the humans, who they believe are guilty, a battle happens between them and ends up securing the tension. Why? Why do they battle? The Selthians show up peacefully, but the humans end up shooting first. Why? Why do they shoot first? Tangent time. Okay, so I love Full Metal Alchemist. And one of the things that I love about this is the war that happened before the story takes place. And the fact that this is a huge point of tension for the people on both sides of the war. The Ishvalans, as well as the people in the government. I forgot what the place is called, but like Mustang and all those people. So I also love how the war, spoiler alert, a few seconds ahead, skip a few seconds ahead if you don't want to see this. I love that it was actually started by the homunculi. That was a huge, like, whoa, what? It was actually the homunculi who did it all along. That was sick. So, I like that. And I wanted to do something similar. Why? I'm going to scroll down in case anyone was scared of the spoiler alert. Why? Because blame is incorrectly assigned and bloodshed is done by an outside source. Who? People inside of the earth. Why? I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to find out yourself by reading. But I'm sure you can probably figure this out by context clues. So, battle happens and the humans get massacred by the species of Selthians and forced to retreat to their other settlement, Domos. Well, I didn't know that was the name of the city at the time, but that's what it ended up becoming, so we'll just call it Domos for everyone's sake, and it makes things less complicated. So, the survivors go to this new city, and Selthian hate is solidified because of the bloodshed, because so many people died, and they're like, what the frick? So, now wouldn't it be cool to follow one of those kids that survived the giant battle? That mini war, that massacre, and we call it the massacre. I call it the massacre of Egality because the city was called Egality. But moving on, why not make that Felicur? I mean, we already had the character made. We just didn't really have much to add to him because we don't have the world that they're living in yet. So now, boom, that's the kid. So. Tangent. I was reading Ender's Game at the time, and I was really fascinated with the idea of child soldiers, not to mention I grew up as a big fan of Halo, and Master Chief was a child soldier, so that kind of clicked, and, you know, it was already like an existing fascination I have with this idea of child soldiers moving on. So, with that tension justified, and we have a child that witnessed this battle, let's make recruitment for a new military to fight the Selthians. Felicur joins. He needs a friend, though. So, he joins with a friend because I want him to have a bestie, a little buddy pal, you know. Why? That why is referring to why do they join? Revenge. But specifically, Felicur's friend joins for revenge. His name is Jameis, by the way. What's Felicur's reason? Well, because his friend joined. Of course. So let's take a step back. Main characters need to be different from the rest of the people in the story. Otherwise, they're not the main character. We gotta, they have to have something that sets them apart. Otherwise, why are we following their story? Why is it interesting? So, why are they different? They will act differently. And I want Felicur to lead a revolution. I want him to push for peace between all species eventually, but he's a kid right now. So as of right now, he's just trying to get through the days. And he doesn't really have like this grand goal of becoming this giant savior, But why? Why does he want peace? Because I want peace. And this camera needs to focus, for goodness sake. I want peace. Me, Michael, like this guy. And so I want my main character to reflect that. At least one of the main characters. I want that to be like a very prevalent theme in this story. So why do they want that, and why don't other people want peace with the Selthians? Because of what they experienced and their environment. Okay, so they're a child soldier. What other influences are in his life? Time for a new character. Takuan. Inspired by Takuan from Vagabond. A writer. He's not a writer in Vagabond, but he's a writer in the story. He's a writer that pushes peace through his writing and helps raise Felicur. But why does Takuan want peace? So now we got another question. We can't just have him want peace. There has to be a reason behind it. So, because during the battle, Takuan witnessed a Selthian act with empathy. Felicur saw this too, and maybe his friend saw it too. He did see it. So, all three of them saw this act of empathy. I'm not going to go into what it is. You'll have to find out yourself. But one of the Selthians, acts very human, and that touches Felicur and Takuan. But his friend reacted differently. Maybe his friend saw it as pity. He did. But Felicur saw it as empathy, and so did Takuan. And when Takuan expressed that, it reinforced Felicur's empathy, because he's seeing this person he looks up to have a very similar view of what happened at that day. So while on the contrary, Takuan's expression of, or I guess him seeing it as empathy reinforced Jameis's rage and pushed him away from Takuan. I like the idea of best friends that are separated by their ideology. Tangent time once again. I love Jujutsu Kaisen, especially the separation that happens between Gojo and Geto, similar to like Naruto and Sasuke. But Gojo and Geto's separation is better in my opinion because they're gay, but also because they're like really good friends before. And like Naruto and Sasuke were never really that tight. It was kind of just like this unseen, like, hey, you're an outcast, I'm an outcast, you're cool, but I'm not going to tell you that, but then we're going to like each other, but not really, and I'm jealous of you. Well, I want that jealous part to be prevalent with Jameis, but it's just, I don't know, the Gojo and Geto one I think is better written, but I want that in my story. So, new subject, we've got a good grasp on Felicur, but now we need to expand on two other things. I want to have a Selthian perspective on this too. So, we need to pick a character who was at the battle. Who? Before that, I need to understand who the Selthians are. How do they act? How are they similar to humans? And how are they different? Let's make them peaceful, simple, right? Why not? Why? Because it's a contrast to the industrial nature of colonial, Martian, human settlements. Okay, so who in this group is the one that we follow? The daughter of the leader. Okay, well, now we need to create two characters. Because we follow the daughter, we need to make the leader first. Jaxel. Peaceful leader of the Selthians, loved by most. Like, he's that fucking guy. Like, if you go walk into a room and you're like, who's the leader? They're all gonna be like, Jaxel. That's the man. He's just that, I don't know, he's just that guy. He's got that fucking aura. He's beloved by his people, but he dies in that battle. And the daughter wants revenge on the humans because they killed her father. They killed the leader of the Selthians. When they showed up in peace, they murdered him in cold blood. Okay, so let's take a step back. The daughter should believe that the humans were responsible for the people's corpses upon arrival, right? That makes sense. This thought is reinforced during the battle, and they... Sorry, question. Do they lead after their father's death? Not yet. No. Why? Because I want to build up resentment and anger at the lack of action that happens after the battle. Oganda's like, we need to take out the humans. What are you doing? But she doesn't get elected. So, who does get elected? Jaxel's son, Groma, her brother, who is someone who is very similar and walks in the steps of Jaxel. He's elected. And Oganda hates this and eventually becomes leader years later. Why? Taking matters into her own hands. How? Killing her brother. Why? Because she wants to protect her people from the humans and to lead a revolution designed to kill all humans. It's like kind of crazy if you ask me. So, why doesn't she kill all the humans after being elected? Because her brother created a city where the humans and the Selthians could coexist. That was Jaxel's dream, but he got killed. He wasn't able to do it. So he creates this city where the scum of the human and the scum of the Selthian can live together in peace and harmony, called Labion. So, killing the humans, all of them, would include the humans of Labion, and that would hurt the Selthians who are currently living in Labion and could potentially cause a civil war amongst the Selthians. This complicates things. So, they hate each other because of misunderstandings and bloodshed that was fueled by misunderstanding. So let's move on. I want to add dragons because dragons are so cool. You get dragons to anything, it just makes it cooler. I mean, like, have you ever seen a dragon in a sci-fi or a fantasy and it doesn't make it cool? Like, dragons are just fucking cool. Okay, and I want to add giants too, and other things. Why? Because, like I said, they're cool, but also because there is real-world history and suspicion that they once lived on Earth. It's not proven. I don't necessarily think 100% they lived on Earth, but there is, like, I mean, you got the Chinese zodiac, which has a dragon on it, and all the other animals are real. I don't know, maybe there was dragons. There should be a bunch of dragons in the prequels, the ones that happened 4,000, 2,000 years ago, but I want there to be only one in the current story that I'm writing, the one where we're on Mars and we got the Selthians and the humans and stuff. So there's one dragon that survives. Why is there only one? Well, they were hunted, and one survives by escaping and fleeing to Venus and living in hibernation. Why were they hunted? Because of valuable resources inside of them, but also because they were a threat to the humans at the same time. The humans wanted to be the apex, and the dragons were a little smart and threatened that apex predator label. So yeah, let's move forward. If we go with there being one dragon that survives, then having there be one robot that survives would also be a perfect parallel. So I'm going to change that to one robot that survives instead of a whole group. This way I can expand on that solitude and isolation and feeling like an outcast no matter where they go, because there's no other robots and he's the last of their kind. I think it's a fun trope. And it could also be a really fun character to follow. I think we should even make them a main character, a murder bot that is living in solitude on Mars, riddled with guilt. I think that's a good start, and you can do a lot with that, and I do, and you'll have to see what I do with it. So subscribe. But we'll name them Plank, okay? After the first coding language, Plank how cool, as well as the shortest measurable distance of length, the Plank length, you know. But what do they want? What does Plank want as a guilty murder robot on Mars in solitude? They're alone, so it only makes sense that eventually they will seek some sort of action, some sort of family or friends. So let's go with that. They want a found family. Why do they want a family? Because well, being alone wouldn't necessarily lead to someone wanting a family. So I need to add a variable. Amnesia. I love amnesia in stories, orphan representation and amnesia. You can't go without it. So they attempt to kill themselves with the rest of their people, reason being that they believe that they cause more harm than good. However, Plank's attempt at suicide isn't successful. They eventually wake up surrounded by the corpses of their comrades, as well as the last minute of their previous life. This hammers home the guilt and remorse, and this also brings Plank to a feeling of longing, a feeling that he had a group but no longer does. I mean, he wakes up and he's surrounded by a bunch of dead comrades, like he's devastated. So, I think that is a good motivation established. Find a family. Eventually, the robot and the dragon will meet, but I'll figure that out later. At least I was thinking that at the time, but I currently know how. But I'm not going to tell you, because you got to read the story to find out. But yeah, the robot and the dragon meet. Speaking of, let's focus back on the dragon. Same treatment I gave the Selthians. How long were they on Earth? Were they always there? Well, knowing the Selthians were originally from Venus, wouldn't it be possible that the dragons were also from Venus? So let's go with that. They came to Earth with the Selthians 75 million years ago. Cool origin, handled. Now, let's look at the state of Earth 75 million years ago. Realizing that that Earth was in the middle of an ice age, and the state of Mars 75 million years ago had like mild oceans and stuff. What if some of the Selthians went to Mars and some of them went to Earth? Then I could have the Selthians evolve differently over 75 million years. The ones on Mars evolved to thrive underground and rule the subterranean oceans of Mars, and while the Earth ones evolved to rule underground in dry climates. I have a lot more on that, and I'll talk about it in another video. So once again, subscribe so you don't miss it. Let's get back to the last dragon. Who are they and where are they? Venus. I didn't write it, but I've already said it. They're in Venus. But you might be thinking, you can't live on Venus. It's super hot. You're going to get burnt to a crisp in a couple seconds. Yes, you will. But if you go underground, temperature is going to be a lot more regulated. So that's what they do. They push through that atmosphere with their tough dragon scales and feathers and shit, and they dig underground and then they hibernate. They needed to escape from Earth, and they thought that the atmosphere of Venus would protect them from outside people, and they thought that the people who were trying to kill them wouldn't go to Venus, like, it's far. And yeah, so from what I'm not telling you, who Muna, that was the name. Why that name? Because I thought it was pretty. And maybe it's the reason the moon is named the moon. It's named after Muna, who flew to the moon, but they really flew to Venus, and it was just a distraction. Like maybe they originally flew to the moon, but from the moon they went to Venus because maybe light pollution. They couldn't see exactly where Venus was and couldn't get the trajectory right. I don't know, whatever. Like that don't matter too much. So how do they get to Venus? Flying in the vacuum of space. Why don't they just freeze up and die? Well, they get there by using Siphon, the power system that I will talk about in another video. And I will not say how they necessarily make it, but I'm just going to say that they make it with the fictional power system that I make. So they're hibernating on Venus now. Okay. Plank and Oganda have good motivations, but it feels like Felicur is still lacking, which is funny considering they were the first character that I made. Not to get this twisted, but there are a number of other characters that have been made by this point, but they are created typically through the existence of the main three, as you've seen previously. Jaxel was created because Oganda needed a father. Takuan was created because Felicur needed some sort of exposure to empathy. And another example, to continue with examples, are since Felicur is in Domos, there needs to be leaders. Who are they? Oh, Felicur has friends. Who are they? Oganda has people working under her. Who are they? Like, you get the picture. You build characters because characters need to fill roles that the characters that you've made are there. Like, you get it. I'm moving on. Back to Felicur. They're empathetic towards Selthians. They're a child soldier. What do they want? Peace for everyone. But how? He's a child, so he doesn't really know. He needs an outside variable to push him. Okay. So I thought, to get this ball rolling, he gets an order to kill a Selthian, and when he finds out that it's a child, he has a dilemma, doesn't know how to act. His conscience says it's not right to kill a kid, but not following orders would have consequences. Now we need to establish what are the consequences, which would be established before they have to make this decision, as far as like in the timeline of reading this. So someone who is insubordinate is killed on the accusation of being a Selthian spy. Cool. So Felicur must decide, go against the military and spare the kid, or kill the kid. Cool. Now we've got this point of no return decision that Felicur, the character who is different from everybody else, needs to make. I wonder what it's going to be. If they're different from everybody else, it's probably not kill the kid. So now his motivation is simply to follow his moral compass, something that can be explored and tested throughout the story, something that can be a great catalyst for change, especially as a child. That, like, your moral compass is changing by the day, and typically it's formed by the people around you, and it's not necessarily an independent decision. It's more so a echo of other people around you. Perhaps we can go the route of what would it take to kill a Selthian child, or even better, what would it take for him to kill a human? What is wrong? What is right? There is something that every kid must go through, a journey that dictates their moral compass for the rest of their life. So their motivation is a more environmentally based, like, obstacle, and based rather than like being based off of a clear objective like the other two, find a family or kill the humans. So I think that could work. It's different, but it's enough. And the fact that his empathy sets him apart from everyone else, I believe that is also enough. And eventually, throughout this story, a more clear objective can be formed through the actions and experiences that Felicur goes through. So now we have three main characters. Felicur, the child soldier who has empathy for Selthians. Oganda, the leader of the Selthians that wants revenge for her people by killing all humans. And Plank, the robot that doesn't fit in and is plagued with guilt and fear. Now to figure out the starting point of the story, which will be in the next video. So, if you're interested in finding out how I pick the best part to tell my story, check out my next video. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and so you can see other videos like how I built a power system that's original, more lore about the Selthians and their brother species or sister species, the Theanarchs, which I didn't talk about at all, but there's more about that, as well as like a deeper dive into all of the characters that I've already established: Felicur, Oganda, Plank, Takuan, Jaxel, not really, but like you get it. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Hope you liked it, and see ya.